breakdown of the fifth step of alcoholics. Anonymous confession. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our faults. The entire AA program is designed to deflate the ego of the sick person, because if there is one thing we have all suffered from, it is egocentricity, self-centeredness, only caring about ourselves without regard for family, friends, work, or society. Therefore, it is not surprising that the program always goes against our natural desires. It is even mentioned that the fifth step is one of the most difficult, as it is where we come face to face with the nature of our most glaring defects, and the deflation of the ego is overwhelming. However, if we want to have peace of mind and inner peace, there is no step more necessary than the fifth step. In the previous step, we realized that there were some mistakes in our inventory, traumatic events we have experienced, and now is the right time to stop living with those tormenting ghosts of yesterday that we have always wanted to avoid. We have chosen to forget. But these wounds we carry in our souls need to be discussed with someone, so that the burden of them is not carried by the individual alone, as it is a very heavy burden. We need to talk about it with someone. Nevertheless, we have been foolish and stubborn in this regard. We have not wanted to confess before God, another human being, much less before ourselves. We believed that simple self-admission was more than enough. We have always wanted to avoid this step. We had only told stories of drunkenness that were already known to everyone, but we had always omitted the facts that really caused us shame and embarrassment. We even thought that we would take these secrets to the grave without saying anything to anyone. They were things we did not want to talk about out of fear, shame, or embarrassment. Many of us thought that this step was not so necessary, but our experience in AA has shown us that those who skip this step will find that their sobriety, if they achieve it at all, will be very precarious. Even some of the veterans who have tried to avoid this step will tell us how they tried to carry this burden alone, how much they suffered from irritability, anxiety, remorse, and depression, and how, in unconsciously seeking relief, they sometimes even accuse their best friends of the same character defects they themselves were trying to hide. They always discovered that relief is never found by confessing other people's sins. Each person has to confess their own. Confessing our faults is a practice that has been of great importance for centuries, not only in AA but also in religion and medicine, since the human need to talk about our most painful experiences gives us a perspective and a learning experience that we could never find in any other practice. In AA, we have had to go further than this. We will have to practice this fifth step if we want to stay sober, since neglecting this step comes at a high price. We have to put pride and egocentricity aside to begin practice so that God's grace can begin to work in each of us, for God will not enter a dirty temple. We must constantly cleanse our souls and spirits, and this step will help us clear our minds so that God's grace can work through each of us. Some of the benefits we will gain from practicing this step are that we will stop living with the terrible isolation we have always experienced, something called loneliness, which has always tortured us, because we felt we did not fit into a social circle and did things to fit in that we later regretted doing. We always lived in solitude with our problems and believed that this was not a problem since no one had to know about our problems. However, when society, family, partners, and even children pushed us away from their lives because of our alcoholism, drug addiction, or our behavior, we were truly left in a loneliness that killed us alive and caused severe depression in us. Many of us even thought about suicide. Another case is that of people who, even though they have their family, partner, children, and co-workers, feel lonely because they do not fit in with the ideals and thoughts of others. We have been so selfish that we sometimes believe that everyone should behave and think like us. Otherwise, they are wrong. This way of thinking has left us out of the game in life and failed in all our instincts. Another benefit we will obtain is the feeling of forgiveness, which we have sought for years, not exactly for other people, but for ourselves. Even when talking to our sponsor, we will have a strange feeling of asking forgiveness from others, but no longer just with words, but with actions, as they will make us see that we have not been as good as we thought, but neither have we been as bad as we thought. Sponsorship brings us into balance by focusing on our reality. As our sponsor listens to our shortcomings, they will guide us to the point of asking for and granting forgiveness. By practicing the fifth step, we will gain more humility, a word that has been misinterpreted by those who are sick. Let us remember that humility is the recognition of who we are, and that is through the confession of each of our shortcomings, since we cannot correct any mistakes on our own, as our methods have not served us well. We tend to minimize or exaggerate the self-assessment of our faults without having a truly objective point of view. For example, we all saw that we lacked honesty and tolerance, that we were sometimes beset by attacks of self-pity and delusions of grandeur. However, although this was a humiliating experience, it did not necessarily mean that we had achieved a measure of genuine humility. Despite having recognized them, we still had these defects. Something had to be done about them, and we soon realized that neither our desires nor our will alone were enough to overcome them. Bill W., 1985, page 55. This means that the fifth step will give us greater realism and really focus us on who we are and why we have been that way. Self-deception is something we have always lived with, and the worst thing is not that we have lied to ourselves all our lives, but that we came to believe our own lies. Many of our attitudes, such as anger and pride, were only a curtain behind which we hid our own defects, which is why it is necessary to adjust to our reality. Therefore, when taking inventory in the fourth step, we realized when we were victims and when we became perpetrators of others. We need to let go of guilt, remorse, and resentment, since we could not be honest with ourselves through solitary self-evaluation. There is a magnificent pretext or excuse for the sick person who does not want to practice this step, which is, why can't God, as we understand Him, tell us where we went wrong? If the Creator was the one who gave us life, He will know in detail where we have gone wrong. Why not admit our faults directly to Him? Why do we need to involve another person in this matter? There are two obstacles to this way of thinking. The first is that we sick people have often distorted our relationship with God, since we want Him to be our pimp for our faults. And some more cynical people have wanted to suggest to God how He should act in their lives to solve their problems. However, confessing our faults to God is not as shameful as it is to a human being. By confessing our faults to another person, we are confirming that we are being honest and truthful with ourselves and with God, because sometimes the prayers we offer up to God are only personal desires and demands that we believe He will forgive us for, and this self-deception has only led us to failure. Now let's look at the second obstacle, which is the person who distorts prayer by believing that God speaks to them. Let's remember that navigating spiritual terrain alone is a great risk we take, and even people who are spiritually advanced seek the advice of their friends and spiritual counselors. That is why confessing our faults in prayer does not mean that it is entirely bad, but we have to reaffirm it with a human being who will immediately give us their point of view and specific guidance regarding the situation we are experiencing at that moment. Now, the challenge will be to find that person who will be our mentor and guide us throughout the entire process. This person must have been able to overcome situations or problems that we have suffered in our lives. A fundamental part of this is the bridge of understanding that the mentor provides, as well as the confidence they will instill in you, so that you feel comfortable telling them about any type of situation. The important thing is your willingness to trust another person and the complete confidence you place in the person with whom you share your first honest and thorough inventory. Even after you have found that person, it often takes great resolve to approach him or her. Let no one say that the AA program does not require any willpower. This situation may require all you have. Once you have carefully explained your intention and the confidant sees how truly helpful it can be, it will be easy to start the conversation, and soon it will be very lively. It is very likely that your sponsor will begin to tell you about their experiences and how they overcame them. In other words, a sponsor not only provides theory, but also has to begin to reinforce everything they say with their actions. Otherwise, the words of the sponsor will be meaningless and sound empty and hollow, as they may harm the person they are mentoring. This individual can be compared to someone who has medicine for everyone except themselves. In practicing this step, we will begin to expel the emotions, frustrations, and resentments that we have harbored throughout our lives. When this happens, serenity and humility come together, and wonderful things are about to happen. People who are agnostic begin to talk about God, and even those who had no faith begin to acquire it in this step. People tell us about their experiences and say that in this step they have felt the presence of God. This feeling of calm and tranquility with ourselves and with God gives us the guideline for taking the next steps, as we will be able to share the feelings of guilt and fears that we have had all our lives. Many of us have found in the fifth step something we were looking for in the bottle, with friends, with our partner, family, and society, which is called tranquility and peace. This will be the beginning of a life full of sobriety, because the humility we find is enormous, and we all know that it has only been given by God, who manifests himself through another human being. Thank you for joining us on this spiritual journey toward recovery. If you have found value in our content and would like to continue exploring topics related to Alcoholics Anonymous and personal transformation, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications to receive alerts for our new videos. Together, we can build a community of support and hope. Until next time, and take care.